guys, it's your boy Luke here for our Masters course breakdown. My favorite week of the year, by far the best week of golf that we have. Of course, the Ryder Cup is up there, maybe the US Open or PGA Championship, give it a run for its money, but my favorite week of golf by far, like I said. And here in this video, we're going to make sure you know everything you need to for this week's venue. So whether it's our course breakdown, a review of the field and tournament format. We're going to go hole by hole at Augusta National, give you guys our key stats for analysis, our favorite comp courses. So whether you're playing DFS this week, placing outright bets, or just a golf fan in general, you're going to know everything you need to about this venue. So there's a ton to get into, just a lot to talk about with Augusta National. So let's not waste any time at all. Go ahead and get right on into it. We'll start with a review of this week's field and some of the tournament specifics here for the Masters, and it's a little bit of a unique one. It's a very small field, just 90 players teeing it up, and in terms of field strength, it might not be the best in the world, but it certainly has a ton of depth. You have a lot of the best players in the world, of course. Pretty much everyone in the top 50 of the official World Golf Rankings will be teeing it up here in Augusta, Georgia. But on top of that, we have past champions, a few people that have qualified via some of the international circuits. So much like a US Open or even a PGA Championship, you do have quite a bit of variety in the field. So some European Tour guys like Takumi Kanaya that got in via the international circuit. So a lot to look forward to. And like I said, all of the best players in the world playing. Some of the notables include Bryson DeChambeau, who will be teeing it up. He was able to over there at the Valero Texas Open. Didn't look all that sharp, but he'll be teeing it up. We also have a few guys like Harris English that won't be teeing it up because of his hip injury. But most notably, I know I held it off to this point, Tiger Woods, very likely to be playing. It's something I've been beating the drum on for quite some time. I called it back there in January, just after we saw him play that father-son tournament that I thought he'd play in the Masters. He looked pretty good out there, and you're not going to tell me that a walk is going to hold Tiger Woods back from playing. It's all about whether he's competitive enough to go out there, make a cut, at least make it look respectable out there, and all signs right now are that is going to be the case. So really looking forward to it. In terms of the cut line with this smaller field, it is adjusted. It's just the top 50 in ties. So rather than the top 65 in ties, it's a lower percentage of the field. But something to keep in mind is that with some of these past champions that are 60, 70 years old in some cases out there, some of these amateurs, some of these guys from the international tours that are in the field, is going to be much easier this week to make the cut than typical weeks. So for 6 of 6 percentages in DFS, or for the outright betting market for the made cut, you're going to have to keep in mind that the numbers are going to look different, right? You're going to have 20 to 30%, 6 of 6 percentage on DraftKings. And over in the outright betting market, a lot of the lines for people to make the cut are going to be in the minus money, if not like minus 200 for some of these studs up top. Some of the past champions here include Hideki Matsuyama, who won at 10 under par last year. DJ won at 20 under par the year before that. Something to note is that was in November, so much different conditions than what they're going to see at this time of the year. Tiger won the year before that at minus 13, the greatest golf tournament in history, don't at me. Patrick Reed won at 15 under the year before that. Sergio had his year at minus 9. Denny Willett won in some of the most difficult conditions that you're going to see over there at Augusta at minus 5. It was really windy that year. And Spieth won the year before that, which was the record before DJ took it to 20 under par at minus 18 the year before Danny Willett won. So you can see there's a wide variety in the scoring. Of course, the outlier with DJ at minus 20 is something that we can throw out, but you can still see that Spieth took it to 18 under par. So it is possible for scoring to be decent here, particularly if it's going to be a little bit wet. But with some of the weather of late, we've seen it be relatively dry this time of year over in Augusta. I expect it to play firm and fast. We also have a little bit of wind in the weather forecast. Now, it's Sunday, the week before the event, so there's a lot that could change with the weather. But if that holds up, could see something close to the single digits under par winning. In terms of the historical cut line, it was +3 last year. Usually it's well over par in the 2 to 5 over par range. So expect to see that once again, barring any of those crazy wet conditions that we've seen just 1 or 2 times over the years. All right, and now time to hop into the course breakdown. We have Augusta National Golf Club in Augusta, Georgia, a Dr. Alistair McKenzie design, and he is one of the best designers of all time. That is not an opinion at this point, it's just fact. Everyone you ask will say he's one of, if not the best designers of all time, and this golf course is his crown jewel, his Mona Lisa, if you want to put it into poetic terms. But either way, he's also the designer of Cypress Point over there near Pebble Beach. Also Royal Melbourne, the home of the President's Cup over there in Australia. Just some of the best designs in the world, both from a beauty standpoint, very pleasing aesthetically, but even more so pleasing from the strategy standpoint. Every single shot you hit at his golf courses have a ton of thought that goes into them. There's undulation on the fairways, undulation on the greens. Getting up and down at these venues is almost impossible. Just undulation at all of the right spots. Pretty much every single slope in play was designed with a lot of strategy in mind, and he really just didn't take the lay of the land. He went out there, he designed his golf courses to be very strategic. Everything was very much intentional for Dr. Alistair McKenzie, and overall that's why he is the greatest architect of all time. In terms of this design specifically, it is a par 72 setup. It's your usual par 72 setup at that. Your 4 par 3s, your 4 par 5s, your usual 10 par 4s as well. So very typical from that standpoint. But that's probably everything that's average about this golf course. Everything else is going to be a little bit wacky. The maximum yardage at Augusta National is 7,558 yards. That's if they play from the back tees and play every single hole to its maximum length. But it usually plays closer to 7,450 yards. So we'll have to see the exact yardage given out by the PGA Tour there on Monday, but again, 7,450 is what we use as a customary number there. In terms of the greens, they're relatively large. They're actually right around 6,500 square foot per green, which if you compare that to the PGA Tour average is right around 200 square foot more, but they play much smaller than that. Like I said before, there's a ton of undulation to these greens, and they're also in the right spots. And what I mean by that is a ton of them are runoff areas where you'll end up hitting the green, but the undulation will end up taking your ball off the green. And a lot of the times, those around the green shots are among the most difficult, not just at this golf course, but also in the world. Just a pure genius when it comes to that design. So even though they are large greens, they play a lot smaller. They tend to run extremely quick in the 12.5 to 13.5 range on the stimp meter. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well. And they are bent grass, which this is one of the few golf courses this time of year where we'll see bent grass. It is extremely hard to upkeep, but if any golf course is going to go through all of that type of effort to put up the best type of bent grass greens in the world, it is Augusta National. They're extremely pure, the best greens in the world to putt on, and you're going to need that, especially with how much undulation's on them. They are extremely difficult to read. Even though they are so pure, you're not going to see all that many putts made. So in general, this is really the key characteristic that gives Augusta National its identity, are its greens. I mean, just think of that Tiger Woods shot towards the back nine of winning one of his first majors, where he literally hits the ball to one end of the green, it runs down a slope the entire way down, it ends up just trundling into the hole. Those are the type of shots that you can hit at greens that have this much undulation and are running at 12.5, 13 on the stimp meter. So that's really the identity of the golf course, is the greens that we have here at Augusta. The fairways are a little bit, let's say, underwhelming when compared to the greens, but compared to most PGA Tour greens, they're extremely unique. You have a ryegrass as the base grass for these greens. Their size, they're slightly narrower than the PGA Tour average, so that's not really what's differentiating them here. It's really the undulation. So just like the greens here, the fairways are extremely sloped, which means that even if you're hitting them, a lot of times you're running off into the rough, which we'll get to that here in a second, isn't all that penal, but it also adds a lot of difficulty with your hanging lies, also with just trying to gauge your distances. There's also a lot of elevation changes at this golf course, so if you couldn't tell by this point, everything you do here is mental just as much as it is physical. Just trying to get the right yardage is as much of a challenge as it is actually hitting your golf shots. We'll get to the rough now. It is about 2 to 3 inches in length, but it is a ryegrass that's relatively easy to hit out of. Because it's at this time of the year, when it tends to be a little bit more dry in Augusta as well, it's also a little bit drier than some of these Florida roughs that we get that can be a little bit sticky, making it not very penal to hit out of. So much like TPC San Antonio though, there is a little bit of a penalty for missing fairways, and it comes in the way of tree-lined fairways. You have right around 10 to 15 yards of room outside of the fairways at Augusta, much like what we had at TPC San Antonio, and then you get into that wooded area. Now, at TPC San Antonio wasn't all that bad. You only had sporadic trees here and there because it was Austin, Texas, or to say San Antonio, Texas. But here at Augusta National, there are deep wooded areas. If you end up getting off into those type of areas, you're chipping out at the very best, if not having to take an unplayable, or perhaps even having to go back to the tee box. So there's definitely a little bit of a factor to missing the fairways here. And in terms of elevation change, I know I mentioned it a little bit, it is a massive factor. So much like the plantation course at Kapalua, where you're going to get those 15 to 30 yard elevation changes off the tee, it is the same story here at Augusta National. Weather isn't as big of a factor here just because it isn't a coastal course. It's in Augusta, Georgia, which is a solid hour and a half into the coast side there. Also, is very protected by the trees. Because we have these tree-lined fairways that are extremely dense, you're not going to see as massive an impact with the wind. But in the Danny Willett year, when it did get in that 20-30 mile an hour range, we saw a winning score of 5 under par. So if it ends up getting really wacky out there, some type of a massive cell ends up coming through, could be something to talk about on Wednesday night when we get that weather forecast. But until then, I'm expecting it to be like most years where wind isn't really something that is a talking point come the end of the week. All right, now for our quick hole-by-hole breakdown. Hole number 1's about as much of a handshake as you're going to get here at Augusta National. You do have the tree-lined fairway on the left. On the right side, a fairway bunker that gobbles up plenty of shots. But the green on hole number 1 is just about as easy as you're going to get. It doesn't have a ton of undulation to it. You do have chip-off areas over the back and also to the right side. So as long as you're able to hit the middle of this green, it should be a relatively easy 2-putt, and you should be able to survive to hole number 2 with an even par there. You will see a few birdies there as well, so it's one of the easier holes you're going to find at this golf course, but you will see a ton of people be a little bit more conservative on hole number 1 to not go ahead and make a double or just something stupid to start out their event. Hole number 2 is a par 5, so a lot more of a scoring opportunity. That's why you'll see some people be a little bit more conservative off the first tee, just to make sure they can get to hole number 2 with the chance to do something special. And this is the hole where Louis Oosthuizen, also Abraham Ancer, made the albatross. So it is relatively long. It does play downhill and to the left. So if you get a little bit of that kick off the fairway, you can put it close, but we've seen some absolute fireworks here. A lot of people will end up hitting into one of these fairway bunkers, or I should say greenside bunkers, getting up and down for their birdie. And after hole number 2, hopefully you're 1 under par, because the rest of the way out, you're going to be running into quite a few roadblocks. Here with hole number 3, it isn't one of the roadblocks, but it's not quite as easy as it looks on paper. It's 354 yards. Bryson DeChambeau most famously called this a par 3, but last year never made birdie on the hole, just really struggled to get the ball onto the screen. Because even though it's only 354 yards out there, it is one of the smallest greens you're going to have here at Augusta National. It's made even smaller with the undulation. You can see the chipping areas over the back of the green, also to the front of the green with some of this false edge, and to the right side. Make this probably right around a 2,000 square foot green at the very most. So very difficult there, not quite the drivable par 4 that Bryson thought it was going to be. Hole number 4 is a relatively long par 3, and this is the real first gut punch. I mean, just almost 250 yards, a ton of undulation out there. The fairway bunkers to the left and in front are also relatively deep, so if you get into them, it is far from a guaranteed up and down. It's the real first test you're going to have at this golf course, so hopefully you're at least 1 or 2 under par. You can afford to give 1 stroke back here, because that is not going to be the first gut punch you experience here at Augusta National. Hole number 5 is a long par 4. It's another gut punch. Those fairway bunkers to the left to make sure that you almost certainly make bogey if you get into them. You have a green that's relatively large, but also with a ton of undulation on it. Hole number 6 is a relatively easy par 3, but I put easy in quotes because this green is among the most difficult on the PGA Tour. So even if you end up getting onto the surface, you have your flat stick in hand, it's no guarantee that you get down into and make that par. So another hole where you're really just looking to get by with par, maybe make a birdie if you stick it close by some reason. Hole number 7 is 448 yards, so much like hole number 1, it's a little bit of a handshake. You have a lot of room over here to the left with a lack of trees. On the right side, though, absolute jail. If you hit into those trees on the right, it is among the most dense areas on the entire course, especially the further back that you play. You can see the further back that you go, the more and more dense these trees get. And you can see if you get really far back here, if you try to lay off the tee with an iron or something like that, you can put yourself in absolute jail. The green is well protected by a bunch of bunkers as well. So even though it is only 450 yards, a little bit more difficult than hole number 1, which will just be a recurring theme throughout this golf course. The further and further that you get into here, the harder and harder that things are going to get. Hole number 8 is a par 5, but unlike hole number 2, is a lot harder to reach into. It also plays uphill, so plays a lot longer than 574 yards. The layup isn't all that easy either because it does play uphill, and this green has a ton of undulation to it, as pretty much every hole does at this golf course. Hole number 9 is 465 yards. It is a steep dogleg to the left. It is a birdie hole, though, because it doesn't have much trouble off the tee. And the longer you are off the tee, the less trouble that you run into. You can see that the tree-lined fairway ends at a certain point. A lot of the elite distance players can take the tree-lined fairways out of play completely, and you are going to leave yourself a wedge into the green. So it is one of the few opportunities at this golf course that you're certainly looking to make birdie at. And you want to take advantage because hole number 10 is another hole that's looking to fight back at you. It's 500 yards. yards. It's a par 4. And even though it plays steeply downhill, these treeline fairways come into play a ton. Because it's downhill, you'll get a lot of rollout. A lot of times you'll roll out into these treeline fairways. And with the fairway bunkers in play here, it's another downhill shot into the green. Just not a lot that can go right. So another hole that you're just looking to make par on and get out of there. Hole number 11 is another one of those holes. It's 517 yards. The tree line comes in extremely close on both sides, and you can really see where the back nine starts to grab you, right? On the front side, you're going to get 2 or 3 holes to make a birdie on. You're trying to strive for the other 6, but on the back nine, the birdie opportunities are far in between. Hole number 12 is the infamous start of Amen Corner. Even though it's only 157 yards, this is routinely the hardest hole on the golf course, so don't let the distance trick you there. Of course, you have the creek in front of it, which gobbles up a ton of golf balls. And you can see there's a good 10, 15 yards of room there, yet a ton of shots end up in the water. That's because of the steep slope from the green down to the water here. You can't really see it on the satellite imagery there. And a lot of times players will go long, end up in one of these bunkers over the green, and then, of course, the green slopes from back to front. So to try and get the ball close to a lot of these pin locations is impossible from that type of circumstance. So hole number 12 is a conundrum that got Tiger Woods the last time he played here. He made a 10 on the last day and ended up completely ejecting himself from contention. Hole number 13 is the easiest hole on the golf course. So as soon as you get through those stretch of 3 holes that are really brutal, hole number 13 is a little bit easier because it's only 500 yards. It is a steep dogleg to the left, and some of the elite distance players might be able to get the ball as far out here as 360 yards, right? So it's only a 320 yard carry, but it's an effective 360 yard difference because you only have 150 yards into this green. So completely shortens the hole if you take that better line there. And last year, guys like Bryson DeChambeau, some of these longer hitters like DJ, had literal pitching wedges into this green. So it's a par 5, but it could play even closer to a par 4 in reality. Hole number 14 is also relatively easy. So after those gut punches on the first 3 holes, 13's gettable. Same thing with hole number 14. It's only 450 yards. You have plenty of room off the tee. These tree lines are really 20, 30 yards offline. It would take a whole lot to get into them, and also just a massive green and target to hit into. Hole number 15 is your last par 5. It's 535 yards. Plays a little bit uphill, so plays a little bit longer than the scorecard yardage. It's relatively wide open off the tee, so you can go out there, really take a good lash at it. But the shot into the green isn't the easiest. It's well protected by a water area in front. There's a ton of chipping areas over the green, fairway bunker over there to the right. So getting up and down, making a 4 here isn't a guarantee. So it's an easy hole, quote unquote easy hole for the back nine, but still something that isn't a gimme. Hole 16 is that infamous hole for Tiger Woods where he hit that around the green shot, ended up just making birdie out of nowhere. It's 173 yards. It's pretty standard when it comes to a hole at Augusta National because it doesn't have a ton of elevation change or anything like that, but a real tough hole with water in play. Of course, plenty of well-placed sand bunkers as well. Hole 17 is the start of the finish here at Augusta National. It's a relatively simple hole, right? It's not really as characteristic as some of these other wacky holes. There's a tree line fairway down the left and right, but it is a little bit sporadic, not quite as dense as some of the other areas at the golf course. Relatively small green, but nothing really out of the ordinary for this course. In 18, the final hole is a dogleg to the right. Really tough driving hole. The tree line fairways here are a lot more dense, so if you end up getting into them, could be absolute disaster for the 72nd hole. These fairway bunkers are well placed because a lot of people can end up hitting through the fairway and into them, especially some of the longer hitters. And you really want to try and hug the right as much as possible to set up an angle into this green between the bunkers. You don't want to have to hit over this green if possible, particularly if the pin location is front right or something like that. And the further left you are opens up some of these right pin locations. So it depends on where they put it there, especially there for Sunday. But this is a difficult hole set up by an even more difficult off the tee shot. All right, and now that we've seen the golf course, let's go ahead and talk about what's going to lead to success here at this year's Masters. For our key stats at number 1, we have shots gained approach, a key staple here on the channel, something I mention pretty much every single week for these course breakdowns, but it is by far the most important part of golf, and specifically here at Augusta National, where we have some of the most penal greens in the entire PGA Tour. When you miss around this track, you're going to be in a world of trouble, whether you're in a chipping area, some of these fairway bunkers, greenside bunkers that are among the most penal on tour. When you miss, you know it around here, and you're definitely going to make your fair amount of bogeys if you don't have it with the approach play, which is why it's my number 1 key stat. We've seen it with winners over the years like Hideki Matsuyama, Sergio Garcia, or even Tiger Woods, who's arguably the best iron player of all time. That's why they've had so much success at this venue. So that's why it comes in there at number 1. Shouldn't be a surprise if you guys have seen this channel over the years. At number 2, we have driving distance, which might be a little bit more of a surprise. I'm typically somebody that prioritizes accuracy over distance, but at a track like Augusta National where the rough isn't all that penal, you're also dealing with a relatively long scorecard yardage at nearly 7,500 yards. Driving distance is always going to be helpful, and like I said before, unless you're missing by 20 or 30 yards here at Augusta National, you're not going to be in all that much of trouble. Even these fairway bunkers are doable, especially if you have a higher ball flight. In the rough, it's pretty much non-existent. So I am looking for more of a bomb and gouge approach here. Now, you don't have to be long to succeed here. We've had guys like Zach Johnson win here, even guys like Jordan Spieth, who at that point of his career wasn't the longest player on tour, have had a lot of success here. So it's not a prerequisite for success at the Masters, but it's certainly something that gives you a boost. And at number 3, we have experience at Augusta National, which is just course history if you guys are looking for a synonym there. But usually it's not something that is number 1 in my modeling or even in my top 5, but at this track specifically, experience matters. It's been proven. You've seen a lot of correlation data over the years. As guys get more success, most importantly, good success at this golf course, are able to put up performances, you will see that replicated over the years. Guys like Jordan Spieth, Tiger Woods, that have had success over the years consistently will continue to do so going forward, and that is definitely going to matter in my modeling. So a lot of the shots gained metrics at Augusta National over the years, now we don't have official shots gained metrics, but I'm able to kind of put together my own algorithm based on just their performances, their finishes, to get an idea of actually how good they've been playing here. Will be a part of my modeling this week. And over the last few years, there's been a few sites that have put together shots gained metrics for the Masters that are doing their best to approximate based on GPS positions and all of that. Using that type of data, we're also able to get kind of an idea of who's playing the best here as well. So that will be something that I'm going ahead and implementing this week. In terms of some of my other key stats I'm honing in on, we have shots gained around the green. Very difficult to get around here without getting up and down once or twice. So that is certainly something I'm looking at. Also, shots gained putting on bent grass. That is the grass type that these players will be facing. Par 5 scoring is also in the model, and same with birdie or better percentage, which might be a little bit surprising for as difficult a track as the Augusta National, of course, for a major championship. But we've seen it year in and year out. The guys that are more aggressive, that are willing to take on some of these difficult pins, have had success over the years. So that's also something I'm adding to my modeling. Probably the last thing that I'll include there. And now for some of our comp courses this week. At number 1, we're going to have Memorial Park Golf Course, which is the home of the Houston Open for the last 2 years. It's a golf course with similarly difficult greens. It was used as the play-in tournament to the Masters 2 years ago. It was very close to simulating Augusta National. I think that's why they chose it, and it stuck as a golf course because it was so entertaining. The rough there was a little bit more penal than what we get at Augusta National, but at the same time, the greens were a little bit less wild, a little bit more tame than what we have this week. But in either circumstance, it's a great comp because you have similar looks off the tee with the tree-lined fairways. Like I said, a good amount of undulation on the greens, just difficult conditions in general. So for guys that have had success at the Houston Open over the last 2 years, I will be giving them a little bit of a boost in my modeling in a similar fashion to what I'll be doing for the guys that have had success at Augusta National. So perhaps for some of these newcomers that don't have as many rounds at the Masters, we'll be able to get some course data for them through Memorial Park. Another golf course I'm using is Shadow Creek Golf Course, the home of the 2021 CJ Cup. So again, not a ton of sample size here, but the golf course is eerily similar to Augusta National. It was a Tom Fazio design. He was said to have had a ton of inspiration from Augusta National when making the course. From an eye perspective, from just the visual perspective, it looks extremely remarkably similar. And also from a skill set standpoint, also highlights a lot of the same skills in terms of approach play, around the green play, just a ton of undulation on the greens. So very similar to Memorial Park, also something that I'm getting a little bit of course history from. And lastly, we have Accordia Golf Narashino, which is the home of the Zozo Championship in 2019 and 2021. A golf course where we don't have any shots gained metrics from, so that's why it's there at number 3. But also a golf course that has a very similar look to Augusta National, tree-lined fairways, a ton of undulation on them, and is kind of the Augusta National over there in Japan. So something that I'm definitely using for some of my comps this week. That is all I've got for this course breakdown video. Before you go on and get out of here, go ahead and let me know down in the comments what you think the winning score is going to be this week. I'll go ahead and take 14 under as my winning score. I expect it to be relatively gettable. Maybe we have one day of bad weather that sets these guys back a little bit, but go ahead and let me know what you guys have got down below. We're going to have even more content throughout the week when it comes to the Masters. So if you're playing DFS, betting outright, if you're on Prize Picks, playing Showdown for DFS, I'll have you covered for all of that. So if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you guys go ahead and do so you don't miss any of that to come. If you guys haven't already hit the like button, make sure you guys go ahead and smash that as well so we can get the word out there to more people about this content. I appreciate you guys. I'm really looking forward to betting this week, outrights, just watching the Masters in general. Again, my favorite week of the year by far. So look forward to all of that. Good luck, guys. Let's have ourselves a week and let's get this cash.